Hello, everybody, and welcome to Web and Beyond Live for February 15th, 2021. And I'm Ray Sidney Smith. I am president of W3 Consulting and managing director of W3C Web Services. And Web and Beyond Live is my opportunity each week to come to you and discuss issues that are important to small businesses in the digital marketing and productivity and technology space. And so this week, what I wanted to do was to cover really just a couple of updates regarding some technology and social network updates that I have for you. And then I want to spend the bulk of our time together really talking about the news of late, which has been around Bitcoin, the cryptocurrency, and really several different cryptocurrencies, including Dogecoin and otherwise. But more importantly, how that has played its way into the no code, low code small business revolution that's really happening around us. And I wanted to kind of put some context on that and maybe bring it to your attention so that you're a little bit more aware of it. And hopefully you can take advantage of this experience, this kind of impending trend that is going to be really important to small business going forward. And I'll try to explain why. So let's first start off with some important news. It's not the most positive news, but it is important. And that is there has been a recent security plugin flaw that was identified in WordPress. And in this case, it was to the responsive menu plugin. And so this really doesn't matter if you have the specific plugin, the responsive menu plugin. Sure, you absolutely need to update your WordPress installation for that one immediately, but just generally, you need to turn on your auto updates for WordPress or make sure that you have hired someone to be able to go ahead and make sure that those plugins are properly being updated and maintained, and not just the plugins. You also need to make sure that your WordPress core, the WordPress software itself, your database, your PHP versions, all of those things in the background also need to be staying up to date along with the theme and the plugins. So this is kind of my, every few weeks, every few months, I try to remind everybody about the importance of security, both in the digital marketing and productivity concerns for your business. This is so important today, and this plugin by itself can, of course, create a huge amount of havoc, not just in your website, but because they can gain access to your WordPress installation, they could potentially gain access to passwords and to other kinds of things that you may not realize is baked into you accessing your WordPress installation. So I just recommend to everybody, make sure that you are updating and making sure that you have all of your pieces put together. If you have any questions about how to get your WordPress installation up to date and so on and so forth, let us know. Next up is just a quick article by Riva Lazansky, and she's a colleague, and she wrote this article for Small Business Trends, and this was all about, is your small business on the wrong side of the digital divide? And it just contextualizes 3 different areas of the business. In this particular case, she talks about the idea of accounting and project management and marketing. And it just basically says that if you are not taking advantage of the digital movement today, you are losing out. You are not gaining the growth and productivity possible by taking advantage of this technology. And this is a kind of forecasting, a kind of precursor to my topic today. And so I just wanted to kind of pique your interest, pique your palate here in terms of what we're going to be talking about in terms of, are you on the wrong side of the digital divide? Are you staying and steeped in the old analog world, or are you really embracing cloud-based and other digital technologies that are going to help you scale the business in a way that will keep it profitable and sustainable? Next up, I wanted to cover just another couple of items in the I don't know what's going on here. My system is, there we go, in the social space. And as you know, I've been talking about Clubhouse the last few weeks, and I just wanted to, not that I'm closing the loop on this, but really just continue a little bit of dialogue on it so that it stays top of mind, because we will continue to see more and more stories coming out about this. One thing is that Clubhouse did recently announce that they were going to be starting on an Android app, and of course I don't know why they didn't launch the iOS and Android app at the same time, except for this continued elitism around the Apple iOS and iPad OS ecosystem. In general, I think that this is kind of a foolish concept, except to the effect that some developers are limited in resources and can only develop one app at a time. I understand that. Remarkably, Android is the dominant operating system on the planet. It is installed on the most machines, most devices around the world. So starting on iOS only says that they're going after potentially a luxury market or a premium market, which is not particularly the case, not from what I understand they're saying. But that's what they did. It's launching the Android app, and they say soon. I don't know what that means, but that's interesting that they are going in that direction. But in line with this news about Clubhouse, of course, we also hear that Facebook is out there building a Clubhouse competitor now. So this is just like par for the course with Facebook. I am not criticizing Facebook. They're a business and they want to stay dominant in the social space. And so they are building an audio chat component probably to the Facebook ecosystem. I'm not sure if they're building a new application, but they'll probably be building some core feature sets that will be baked into either Facebook or its own separate app. I'm not sure. And that will go ahead and compete with Clubhouse. Now, the funny part about this is that Twitter's already been doing that. Actually, Twitter has been building something called Twitter Spaces. I've mentioned this on prior shows. So we already see social audio spaces being, kind of an important place for social networks to get into. It's funny that they're going this route where they started with really text and images. They went to uploading asynchronous video. They went to then doing live stream video. And now they're kind of moving back toward live streaming audio. And it seems a bit obtuse to me that they are going backwards in that sense. Twitter actually has always had the capability for you to broadcast live in audio with Twitter Live. So you've been able to go onto Twitter Live and actually broadcast audio only. You didn't have to show an image, and it would just show like a moving waveform in a circle. So you've been able to do that for quite some time. So it's not necessarily that this is new. The idea here is that you're bringing this into a group environment where you have either an individual or a few individuals who are on stage in that space akin to Clubhouse. So that's really interesting, and I think that it's important for us to recognize that Clubhouse, while it's gotten a lot of notoriety, continues not to be a very important component of anyone's overall social strategy. So we'll see where Clubhouse goes. I am interested in continuing to play around in and on Clubhouse to see what it can do in terms of making good connections and those kinds of things. I think there is an opportunity there for it to be in the ecosystem for truly networking, professional networking. I think there's a component there that's useful and will stay around. Whether it will be on Clubhouse or whether it will be on Twitter or Facebook, I'm not really quite sure yet, and we'll just keep paying attention to it to see. But of course, in the same vein as Facebook and Twitter building this Clubhouse competitor, I also wanted to make note that I haven't yet, which is that Twitter recently purchased Review, which is in essence a newsletter tool that allows you to be able to launch a newsletter, but not just launch a newsletter and manage those newsletters, but also managing the subscriptions associated with them so that you could give away a free or premium, a paid subscription associated with that newsletter. And so this is really kind of fascinating to me that Twitter has kind of jumped into this space. But as the prior article actually noted, this New York Times article that I showed on screen, it actually talks about the fact that Facebook also is in the process of building out a newsletter facility for being able to do this same thing that Review and other tools like that are doing. So it's kind of interesting that some of these larger social networking companies are actually doubling back and starting to take over different verticals that they otherwise weren't before. Facebook notably purchased Instagram. That was another social network. But they also actually have purchased something called Oculus, and Oculus is a virtual reality platform. So they're really in the gaming space and trying to step into that industry vertical. They're also now in the vertical for newsletters. So they're trying to step into the market with Constant Contact and MailChimp, MailerLite, and other tools like that. So we can see that there's this interesting play between social networking companies now trying to step into other other categories, both to stay viable, relevant, and also to continue to diversify their revenues, so that if one part of their social network ecosystem starts to go down, they have a place to stand on, especially as we see more regulation coming from different governments and potentially more of this notion that social networks should be paying for other things. Right now, Google and Facebook are challenged by the Australian government regarding Google News and Facebook presenting news. So you see here, if they're going to have to start paying news publications for presenting news on their platform, that is of course going to impact their bottom lines. And so they're trying to diversify revenues here and seeing where the dollars are going to flow. So it's a little fascinating to me about all of this. That being the case, just letting you know that Twitter, of course, has purchased Review, and Facebook is building their own newsletter management. So just like with Facebook Shops and Instagram Shops, you may be seeing Facebook newsletters and Twitter newsletters coming to a platform near you. Moving right along then to kind of what I wanted to spend the majority of our time discussing today, which is the fact that in October of last year, PayPal announced, along with Venmo, that they were going to start both offering and accepting cryptocurrencies through their online payment platforms. This is a huge change in the way in which they are viewing the world. And I just wanted to start off by saying that while I'm going to be talking about cryptocurrency, I'm by no means a financial advisor or giving any level of financial advice. And so whether to hodl or not to hodl is not really the point here. And I put up on the screen the definition of hodl, which is defined by Investopedia here as a term derived from a misspelling of the word hold that refers to buying and hold strategies, or buy and hold strategies in the context of cryptocurrencies, as well as Bitcoin, of course. So this is not about whether to hodl or not to hodl. This is really all about the notion that as a business, is the concept of cryptocurrency useful to you in your business? And as I have told many people for a long time now, I mean, really the past decade, I've been telling people to look for the time when we've crested over the point where it becomes trivial and easy to accept payment for things like Bitcoin and other Bitcoin Cash and other types of cryptocurrency. Now, so that you're aware, and maybe you don't know this, but Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, all it means is digital money, right? Just think about it as digital money on that level. But underneath Bitcoin is a deeper technology known as blockchain, and I'll explain that very shortly. But back to the news here, right? We have PayPal and Venmo now saying that they're going to basically transact in cryptocurrency, which is a huge statement, and it really pushes the envelope of what Bitcoin has been doing thus far to date. It's really just been an investment vehicle for people, not really necessarily a true cash payment vehicle for the masses. By bringing it to Venmo and to PayPal, it really does make it now viable. And of course, then we have news out of Tesla purchasing, I think it was $1.5 billion in Bitcoin. You have BNY Mellon also making a place for people to be able to hold, basically contain Bitcoin as a part of their services. And so BNY Mellon, went ahead and stepped into it and said, yeah, we're going to now allow for the holding of these kinds of trades of cryptocurrency. And then on Wednesday, MasterCard came out and said, hey, by the way, we're going to open up the network for allowing cryptocurrencies to transact over the MasterCard network, which is just like mind-blowing in terms of how you think about this. So if you start to see Square and PayPal and Venmo and now MasterCard, and of course, all of the big banks, they're going to follow where the money flows. So I'm not particularly concerned about them. But really, major companies embracing this in the front-end consumer transactional space, this is where the rubber meets the road for you as a small business owner. And we need to start thinking about how we are accepting and how we are making payment in Bitcoin. Now, as I've mentioned in past episodes, remember that Bitcoin is not fiat currency. So a dollar today is not a dollar tomorrow when we are talking about Bitcoin to USD. There is a transaction that's happening in between that, which is the conversion of dollars to Bitcoin, right? So there's potentially a change in the value of something when you make that transfer, plus the cost of that transfer. And then on the other side of that, there is the transition out of the system, right? So someone pays you in Bitcoin, and now you want to turn that back into the fiat currency, the currency of your nation. When you transact it out of Bitcoin, then of course there's a potential currency exchange that happens where the value may be different than the dollar you put in. So you might take a dollar, put it into Bitcoin. That may have changed to $1.50 by the time the purchase was made. Now, when the purchase was made, you now have that Bitcoin in there, whatever its value is. But then, say 10 days later, you decide to move it back to USD, and maybe now it's only worth 75 cents. So you can see that the dollar in and the dollar out, the value may be very different on either side of those things. That, of course, happens in markets all over the world all day long, wherein you might buy a Chinese yuan, and that yuan may be valued differently by the time you come on the other side and want to convert it back to USD. So there's all that opportunity there that I think we all need to be very mindful of when it comes to the fact that we're now trading in what is in essence a volatile currency. And so I try to step into this in the sense of being very, very cautious as it relates to it. But the other side is that if people are willing to pay you in cryptocurrency and it becomes more and more the kind of fad, you need to be prepared for that. You need to start talking to your banks, and you need to start figuring out whether or not you're going to take those payments via PayPal or otherwise in your own websites and through your own services in retail. So just start to consider that. But this takes us to kind of a deeper point that I thought was really interesting, which is I thought to myself, well, what if I wanted to launch my own blockchain? And this came to the point, which is something that I think we should all kind of think about, which is that cryptocurrencies run on top of something called blockchain. Blockchain is really a decentralized ledger. So think about it from an accounting perspective. It is literally the ability for us to be able to verify publicly every transaction that happens using that public ledger, that digital ledger. That's the part that allows, along with some, cryptography, some digital security, our ability to be able to create this immutable ledger in a public system that allows us to be able to not trust the other party because we have a central source of truth as it relates to those transactions going in and out of the system. We don't need to have identity associated with this because we don't need to care about the identity of the person. We don't need to care about the trust of that individual relationship, and we don't need to worry about the changing of things later because the database tracks everything publicly without the ability for you to go back and say, oh no, I really made an error here, and so let's fix that thing. It would require an additional entry and agreement among the parties in order for that to be able to happen. So blockchain really is this accounting system that's in the digital sphere and can be used for many, many other things. And that's really where I think most of the power of blockchain will come for small business in the near future. And so let me talk about it from a couple of angles here. And so I'm just kind of thinking extemporaneously here, so I may jump around a bit. But I am the Google Small Business Advisor for Productivity. And for many years, I've talked about the ways in which Google has created different mechanisms for us to be able to automate productivity in our own businesses. Case in point, they used to have an application called AppMaker, which allowed you to be able to tie different parts of your, at that time, G Suite and now Google Workspace together so that you would be able to create your own bespoke applications within the business. So say, for example, you wanted to build an HRM, a human resources management system. You would be able to take Google Forms and Google Docs and Google Slides and YouTube videos and tie them all together into a master application that you could then use in your own business. Use your own data. It's locked behind your own security system. You would be able to only share it with the people you wanted to or to the public at large. And that was your data and your tools bound together in the way in which you wanted it to. So instead of having to build a completely new application, you'd be able to do all of this using the tools you already had in your house. So the goal would be to go from, say, 6 months, 18 months, 24 months to build out the application to just a couple of weeks. Plan out the application and go. They got rid of AppMaker because they found themselves in a place where not a lot of people were using it, and the reality was that we already had some low-code tools built into Google Workspace that could allow us to be able to manifest the same things. And they made a really key acquisition, which is this tool called AppSheet. So AppSheet allows you to be able to now create what are called progressive web applications. Progressive web applications sound like a little bit like what they are. They're web applications that allow you to watch them in or view them in a responsive environment across any application device ecosystem. So you could open this device on Android, on iOS, on iPadOS, on Windows, macOS, and it'll just expand and shrink to the size of the window. And for all intents and purposes, it's the same application, it's running the same code, and it displays itself in a natural format on that device. So it kind of acts like an app, and in essence, it is an app, but it's not inside of the container of a typical application that you would normally feel like was, say, a Mac application. So it's just written in a special way so that it can run across all of those systems. So we now have this no-code application movement where, in essence, you can build all kinds of apps in no-code or low-code. And this article from VentureBeat kind of covers it for us, which we have all kinds of new opportunities to be able to pull together the functionalities we want in our businesses, and we are capable of manifesting them. This is showing on screen, we're showing the various low-code application platforms in enterprise. And in small business, though, we also have that kind of concept coming coming together. And so, of course, it talks about this idea that there's really a culture issue. We have to learn the platforms that are no-code or low-code platforms, and we need to, of course, tie together those platforms in order to be able to do it. Those are definitely some resource constraints that we have to do. And, of course, money is going to be an issue always when it comes to doing this. But what I glean from this article, we don't have to look at the article necessarily to understand this, which is that when we think about the no-code, low-code world, the importance here is that we are now capable of tying together applications that do separate functions. We can tie them together and create new functionality specific to the business that can help to either automate or speed up the needs of the many, that is the needs of the many inside of the organization. And that, of course, is not going to slow down the organization in development time. And there are so many different cases where we need to tie data together, but we just don't have the technological skills, that is the coding skills, to make that happen. And we can actually flash forward now to the use of blockchain to be able to do that. And the reason for using blockchain is that it is decentralized. So again, blockchain is decentralized in the sense that we are not depending upon any one computer, centralized server, for purposes of us having all of the processing and data storage happening on that one computer, right? If we have one computer, one server with all of that data, all of that processing, and so on and so forth, that is a single point of failure. That is, if it was hacked, If the power went out, if there was data corruption, if there was any other issue happening to that one server, it goes down. We lose access to both the processing of the data, right, for the purposes of the application, but we also then lose access to it. And now what we have in blockchain is the ability to actually spread out that risk across all of those things. And one of the number one problems, though, is that I don't know about you, but the last time I decided to build my own blockchain is a while ago. Of course, I have built my own blockchain just for purposes of testing it out. But for you, that's probably not likely. You're not likely to go out there and say, okay, I'm going to go launch my own blockchain on my own servers and start decentralizing. So the great part about this no code, low code revolution is now that we can actually do this, not for purposes of cryptocurrency, but for purposes of our own business development, we can actually start to do this. And we have tools like what I'm going to bring up on screen now. We have Atria. And Atria actually allows you to go in and build your own what's called a decentralized application, or a dApp, in a no-code environment. So if we scroll down here, you can see that it has a no-code for businesses. You can build this out, but here they say no code required. Basically, they have a drag-and-drop builder that allows you to be able to build decentralized applications in this ecosystem. And of course, Atria is just one example of many different tools that are coming onto the market and giving us this capability. What I wanted to kind of posit to you is the importance and power of the next 5 years. You don't need to jump on the blockchain bandwagon today, but really over the next few years, what we are going to see is a greater and stronger move toward decentralization of a lot of these things that we typically expected to be centralized. You think about your financial accounting software being centralized on a server run by QuickBooks, Intuit QuickBooks, or Wave, or Xero, or another one of those accounting platforms in the cloud. Well, we're probably going to see more and more people saying, well, why can't we decentralize that data so that we can tie them together through our own systems? So why can't we just build our own tool that brings that technology in and within the organization? And I'm really curious to see whether or not we see more of this happening from the perspective that it's not just big enterprise, big box businesses, but going back to Rivaliski's article that we started off with, which is, can we potentially do this in a way that small business owners are capable of commanding their own future and their own world and competing with big business in the cloud using decentralized software and even cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and otherwise? And I argue that I think that's the future. I really do believe that going forward into the future, we're going to see a world where we are building out the decentralized web. That is a web that is not controlled by any one particular party like Google or Bing, which is owned by Microsoft, or any of those other search engines. We may use them for some capacity, but in essence, the true decentralization of the web will come to pass by virtue of decentralizing the way in which we access those pieces of the web. But more importantly, as a business, as a small business, we need to start thinking about how we reduce the control that specific organizations have over our data and the way in which we manifest the core functionality of our systems. So for example, I'm building an application for our company, W3 Consulting, and in the process of building that application, I've decided that we're going to actually use a series of no-code and low-code solutions to build that application. So from the consumer's perspective, from the user's perspective, they won't even know. I mean, maybe they would know, but most likely they won't know once we've wrapped the entire application inside of our own app wrapper. They won't even notice that they're using a no-code or low-code solution because we've put together the pieces from different tools to make that happen, and they just get a seamless experience. And I think that we're going to see more and more of that happening, and if we're capable of doing that as a dApp, as a decentralized application using something like Atria, all the better, right? Because now we are reducing our risk that any one particular service is going to take us down for the count if they go out of business or if they change their terms or things of that nature. And so I just wanted to pique everybody's attention about this. I think it's important for us all to recognize that and really start to think about how we're going to utilize these technologies. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not in a year, but in probably 2 to 5 years, this is coming, and we need to start setting ourselves up for that. And so Robin is popping in. Hi, Robin from Startup to Growth. And she noted that regarding Periscope Audio Live on Twitter, she says she decided to challenge herself to take a small professional development learning bite each day, or average of 5 per week surrounding technology. And so today's bite is to explore Twitter Live audio only broadcast. And so great. Yeah, it's really interesting. You just go into Twitter, you open up the application, and where the new tweet is, you will then be able to go live. And one of those options for going live is audio only. And you'll be able to go live on Twitter audio only, and it's a really fantastic little piece there. And so Robin's noting that it's been a great episode on Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, and the no code, low code world. And so you're more than welcome for putting that on your radar. And that's really the goal of today, is really to get it onto everyone's radar, so that you're aware that this technology revolution is actually going in the inverse, where it's not about learning code. Which, again, I think it's important to learn a little bit about how programming works, so that you're aware of the fundamentals of how to think about code being put together, but then stepping back and saying, okay, if that's how I would archetype code, well, now how do I do this with no code or low code technologies, where you don't actually need to learn how to code in order to be able to manifest these things? Maybe you need to learn how to do a little bit of coding, but the little bit of coding is actually de minimis to the production of the overall ecosystem, because you can build these things now in this way. All right, a couple of announcements very quickly. In early March, I know I said in early February, but really it's going to now be in early March. I'm going to be highlighting, you'll note that at the end of December into the early part of this year, we did a program called the 12 Days of Small Business, where I highlighted different small business owners, and where what I'm going to do is I'm going to be highlighting the participants and talking about them and what they talked about in their answers to me regarding how to help small businesses. I really think it's important for us to keep that conversation and dialogue alive. And I've heard back from many of you listening to the podcast with responses. And so thank you for doing that. It really is encouraging. And so I'm going to be kind of sharing with you their suggestions in terms of how you would be able to help them, which will hopefully help with you brainstorming new and creative ideas for helping other small businesses and your own. And so I'll be talking about that actually in the context of Google Web Stories. So you'll note that at the end of last year, I had been talking about what a Google Web Story is and how Google was bringing web stories to the WordPress platform. And so I've developed a couple of web stories. I will be sharing with you what they look like and how they have performed in and on our own website and in the search engines. So I just wanted to kind of give some time to that to see some of the response there. And so in early March, we'll be covering that stuff. So I just wanted to put that on your radar. This week, finally, it's just work has been so no complaint, but work has been so busy that we have not published our upcoming events, but I will be publishing those upcoming events on Web and Beyond community as well as on our events page. And so if you go to w3cinc.com/events, you will go ahead and see all of our events. And so hopefully the latter part of this week, they'll all be up there. I have my team working on getting them up there now after I've written the descriptions and so on and so forth. So we've got a whole bunch of fun events coming up in February and March and April. So just look out for those events upcoming as well. And as I noted, if you're not a part of the community yet, feel free to join us at webandbeyond.community. That's our digital community that I've created for all of the small businesses in my audience. So whether you're a customer of W3C Web Services, or if you're just watching the Web and Beyond live, or you listen to the podcast afterward, or you listen to the podcast on Web and Beyond Cast, feel free to join us in the community. You can go ahead and do that by going to www.webandbeyond.community. Okay, and so with that brings us really to the end of our time together. And if you've enjoyed the live stream, feel free to hit the thumbs up icon. That helps us make new small business friends and brings them into the fold. And so thank you for doing that. If you have a question, leave a comment on the video. You can tweet or message us at W3 Consulting on Twitter. Join us every Monday, typically at 11 a.m. Eastern, unless I note otherwise, on the social channels here for Web and Beyond Live. Thanks so much for spending this Web and Beyond Live with me. I'm Ray Sidney Smith on behalf of W3 Consulting and W3C Web Services. Have a great week ahead, marketing and managing your small business on the Web and Beyond. Take care, everybody.